Hi, this is Don Pren. Today we're going to talk a little bit about estate planning and financial planning, and we have the CEO of Insmark. Insmark's been developing software for life insurance agents and financial planners for the past 30 years. We have Bob Ritter, CEO of Insmark, here to tell us a little bit about what's happening in the industry and why there is so much confusion with regard to financial and estate planning and some things that we can do about it to help our clients. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, Don, how are you?
Good, good. So tell me just a little bit about when you developed the system. What's the system called again?
Wealthy and Wise.
Wealthy and Wise. And if you could, I know one of the things that you have noticed in the industry is that a lot of the estate and financial planning that's being done is not taking into account some really crucial factors. Can you help us understand a little bit about that?
Sure. I think one of the things that's most important is to get a complete grasp on the asset and liability picture, asset by asset. Too many programs say, well, let's say we've got a net worth of $7 million. Regardless of the makeup of that, it could be mostly retirement plans, it could be mostly equities, it could be a reasonable mix of a variety of things. That needs to be done asset by asset, because without it, you're just going to guess at yield. You say I'm worth $7 million, I can get 4% on it. That's crazy. You can't do it that way.
Okay, so when you say asset by asset, give me an example of a couple different assets that someone might have.
Equity accounts, tax-exempt accounts, muni bonds perhaps.
Real estate.
Real estate, lots of non-liquid, art collections, a vacation home, personal residence. Do you plan to downgrade it within 5 years to move to Arizona, buy a smaller place? Are you going to enhance your mortgage?
Okay, so what you're saying is one of the cornerstones of this Wealthy and Wise system is that you break down the client's assets into different categories. I think I understand that. Now, what's the next step?
Determine whether or not there's some continuity to those assets, the house being a good example. Are you going to stay in this house? Are you going to increase the mortgage? Are you going to decrease the mortgage? What are your intentions relative to your assets? I don't just want to snapshot what they are today. I want to know what you intend to do with them.
Okay, I understand. So beyond the asset class, what are some other things that you see that are crucial to be done in the planning that are not being done?
Most people fear running out of money more than any other single issue. It's absolutely a critical consideration you have to do when you're doing wealth planning. So once you get the asset base established, you have to determine what that client's desires are in terms of cash flow.
So what you're saying is there's a disconnect sometimes between sort of how much people have in terms of total net worth and assets. That's sort of one number that they don't really relate to versus how much they're actually needing in income and what they're needing to spend and how long they're maybe going to live and inflation. So you're saying there's a disconnect between the asset number that people kind of know about, but then they're really worried about their income and future income needs.
Yes. So
that makes sense.
The system is designed to basically predominantly and initially determine cash flow needs, and then determine in the asset base what's the best way to get that cash flow. In other words, if you had an individual with a high-yielding equity account and a CD, and he starts to need income, what's the best place to take that income from? Do you raid the equity account, or do you raid the CD? It gets more complicated when you have 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 asset classifications.
Okay, so I've got someone who's 70 years old. They've got significant assets. Some are liquid, some are illiquid. They need X amount of income every year during their retirement years. You're going to project that out. But then this is interesting. You're also going to do an analysis to figure out the best place for them to get that income from those different assets. Do I have that right?
Exactly right. The case study we're going to talk about in a little while, it's a couple that wants $250,000 a year in after-tax cash flow. Well, the first month of their retirement, they need $22,000 odd to do that.
Okay.
Where do they get that from? Nobody tells them. They may have gotten the best advice as far as asset allocation is concerned, but their advisor left, and the first months have come up, and the mom looks at dad and says, "Okay, we need $22,000. We got all these assets. Where do we take it from first?"
Okay, this is interesting. So you're saying that the industry has been focused on asset allocation, which is where do I invest the money? How much risk do I take? But it has left out the crucial element of when I actually need some of the money, where do I go and get it?
Well, the industry is focused on distribution planning, but not to the extent that I'm talking about. In other words, you need to know what your equity account can yield. You need to know what your munis are going to yield, either aggressively or conservatively, based upon your client's desires. But try to determine, do I have an account that's so weak that I can spend principal in that account and let the other ones accrue? The program that we put together, regardless of the asset base, will tell you, take that first $22,000 out of this account.
You know, I have to tell you, that it just doesn't seem like it'd make that much difference where I get the money, and you know, just listening to you, that just doesn't sound like it. Does it make a huge difference?
The difference can be phenomenal. The case I'll show you will startle you. It's so big. The difference between taking it smart and taking it not smart.
Like the difference between running out of money and having money throughout retirement?
The case I'm going to show you, you're on the way to running out of money, as opposed to having a growing net worth. Even both plans took the same cash flow. One has got an increasing net worth, the other has a depreciating net worth, with a major difference between the two.
So you're saying the difference in doing this right could be devastating if you do it wrong for your clients?
Yes.
In other words, it could be the difference between your clients having increasing net worth throughout their retirement and clients running out of money during retirement.
Or an increasing net worth that's got some room for some yields different than you expected, as opposed to one that would totally crater your estate if that were to happen.
If you were to guess in the industry now, what percentage of the planners out there are looking at this issue and making solid recommendations about where money should come? I mean, what percentage of the planners out there are doing this now?
As far as we can tell, only our Wealthy and Wise licensees are doing that. This is something that's unique to us. I don't know why. It seems so eminently logical, but I haven't seen it anywhere else.
Wow. So now tell us a little bit about, you know, it's one thing for us to talk about this, and what you're saying makes sense, although, like I said, it's hard to understand why taking income from different asset classes would make that much difference. I guess we're at a point where you kind of need to prove it. And you know, how do you, let's say I was a client, how do you prove to me that I should take money out of my IRA, for example, instead of out of my equity account? I mean, how do you go about demonstrating that?
Let me show you, because this all happens prior to tax planning. We'll do some tax planning as part of what we're going to do, but I don't want to do any of that until I can prove to you that this is a valid analysis. Part of the 3 or 4 points we've talked about, but probably the most critical point.
Okay, so you have a software program called Wealthy and Wise. You put the client's assets in and how much, what interest rate they're earning on different things and their tax information, and you're saying that Wealthy and Wise then lets you do different assumptions about different income coming from different places, and then you can kind of show A, B, C, D. You can kind of show different options. Is that what we're going to see?
Yeah, it'll optimize the order of accessing cash flow, which what it'll do. The algorithm we build in will actually do that. It's a pretty complex calculation. I'm prouder of that than almost anything we've ever put together, because it's for the technically minded, it's a factorial solve, which means it's multiples of 1 times 2 times 3. You got 10 assets, the program will tell you to go to lunch while it figures it out, because it's such a huge. It's like 40 million calculations it has to go through to do it.
That's interesting. So it's looking at all the different asset classes of a particular client and case, and it's running through the different ways it could take money, and then it's stacking them up and giving you the best priority of where to go when. And you're saying that's a pretty complicated calculation, even for a computer.
And that doesn't mean you have to leave it that way. You might have someone say, well, that particular asset, I kind of want to leave that one alone. You can move it, but the program will solve it perfectly for you. And most of the time, that's what our clients utilize.
Okay, so you're able now. Let's see that, and you're going to go on the computer now and show us a sample case. Is that what we're going to do?
I am.
Well, let's see it.
Okay. Here's Matthew and Catherine Fox. They're 65 and 60. They've got the following liquid assets that are available for retirement income. They've got some other illiquid assets, but I'm talking about the assets available for cash flow. They got $600,000 in a CD. We've assumed a yield, their assumption of 4%. They got $1 million in muni bond fund, assuming 3.5% yield. A little over $2.5 million in mutual funds, assuming a yield of 7% growth, 1% dividend. Matthew's got $700,000 in an IRA. Catherine has $900,000 in an IRA. They both assume that they will yield 8%. That's almost $7 million of liquid assets. Assume they want $250,000 a year in after-tax retirement cash flow, compounding by, let's say, a 3% factor for inflation. If you look at what we call bad logic, let's provide the cash flow, but compare the least efficient withdrawal order to the most efficient. And bad logic says we'll start with Catherine's IRA, we'll then go to Matthew's IRA, we'll then go to the equity account, we'll then go to the tax exempt account, and then we'll go to the CD if we need to go that deeply. Let me show you the impact of doing that in this particular case. As you can see on the screen here, we've got the assets set up under the bad logic format, where we're starting with the retirement plans, moving to the equity account, to the tax exempt account, and then finally to the taxable account relative to places to get cash flow. Now, a real quick way to check whether we can pull this thing off, we really want to check whether the income desired has been met. That works, because the income has been provided as required, $250,000 a year, increasing at 3% for inflation offsets. And then the net worth is cratering. That estate of about $7 million is, over the next years to life expectancy, is now down to $4.6 million. And it is what it is. Now let's see what happens if we do this very, very important button hit, maximize net worth. When you do that, the system automatically puts these accounts in the order where you get the best long-range net worth plus the income. And we check results on that one again, and you see they've got the income again, required the same as provided. Now look at this. Instead of $4 million, we got $10 million. There's a $6 million differential in net worth between taking it smart and taking it dumb. And nobody's telling these folks about that. Now, if you look at this a little bit in more depth, there's the bad logic. We just saw the impact of that. There's the good logic. And the order that the liquid assets are accessed is just critical to any kind of a reasonable analysis. If you want to see the comparison, use that max net worth button if you've got the system or acquire the system, because then you'll be able to show clients this graphic, which is pretty extraordinary. There's your 10.3, there's your 4.6, good logic versus bad logic. Most people make better decisions in a comparative environment. Most presentations are done in an absolute environment where you show somebody the best job that you can do for them, and you show the results of that. We feel very strongly you should always show people what they have now compared to what you're going to do for them, and then compare the two. Because again, as I said, people make far better decisions in a comparative environment rather than in an absolute environment. So there's a 122% increase in long-range net worth in this example for the Foxes. 122% increase in long-range net worth by selecting the most efficient distribution order. Now, wealth to heirs is impacted because the Fed's got a big bite of this. We've assumed the rules that are in force now as of January 1, the annual exemption drops to $1 million per person from $5 million per person. So the kids get tagged pretty good here. But still, I'd much rather have them get almost $5.4 million than $3.4 million. There's a $2 million difference to the heirs. And we'll work on that, see if we can improve that further as we go along here. But there's the picture at life expectancy. The net worth difference is just terribly dramatic. Now, transfer taxes, of course, are higher with the lower graphic there. Good logic, because you got far more net worth. Obviously, your transfer taxes are going to be bigger. But even taking them into account, your wealth to heirs, the two green lines, is much superior, much more superior with a good logic approach. Next step, with almost $6 million more in net worth, let's do a little tax planning. Let's do an easy one, where net worth and cash flow are not impacted at all. We'll do a new strategy 3. Which names the Fox's favorite charity the beneficiary of both of their IRAs at the second of their deaths. Perhaps using a donor-advised account with their children as the advisors, kind of keeping the control of the asset within the family unit. This will be a revocable beneficiary designation, and I can't emphasize that strongly enough. This is not something that the charity can stop you from doing anything. You're just saying what happens when you die. You can get into assets while you're alive. You can change the charitable beneficiary. You can even revoke the beneficiary designation. But if you did it and you kept it in your estate, what would happen is your net worth is not impacted at all. You've got the identical net worth with strategy 2, good logic, and strategy 3, good logic, plus IRAs to charity at death. So far, no impact whatsoever on net worth. Kids are impacted some, not as bad as you might think, because those IRAs are taxed terribly at death between income tax that's attributed to them and estate tax that's attributed to them. It can run as high as 75%. So the kids are impacted by about $900,000. Their inheritance is projected to be 4.4 instead of 5.3. The offset to that, of course, is the charity is scheduled long range to receive an inheritance at 3.3%, 3.3 million. If there's no charitable motivation whatsoever in this family unit, maybe that's not such a great idea, but it's such an easy thing to do for such small cost, that's going to appeal to a lot of people as an example of what you can do with the system. Again, using comparative logic. And there's that graphic. Net worth is still close to the same. Transfer taxes have now been cut almost in half. Wealth to heirs is significant, and wealth to charity is significant. A lot of people will look at that graphic and say the lower graph's better than the upper graph. But let's see if we can't fix that up a little bit. Let's see if a wealth replacement trust, I'm going to call that a WRT as we go along, wealth replacement trust. It's a trust designed to pick up the loss of assets due to the charitable gift of the retirement plans. And we're going to call that strategy 4, which is good logic, plus Irish to charity, plus the wealth replacement trust. The Foxes are going to make annual gifts of $16,000 a year for 10 years to fund a life insurance policy owned by the trust that's drawn in favor of their kids. Now, obviously, the $16,000 can come from one of two places. It can come from their income, in which case they don't have $250 anymore. They only got $234, or it can come from their capital. And using the logic of the system, let's leave their income unaffected and we'll take it out of their capital. So we're going to use net worth to pay that $16,000 premium, gift for premium. Now you can see that will touch their net worth a little bit. Their net worth long range drops from 10.3 to 9.8, just a 5% decrease in long range net worth. But the presence of the life insurance means that we've maintained the long range wealth to their heirs almost exactly the same as it would have been. As a matter of fact, in the early years, it's a little bit greater, but it ends up about the same. So we've taken care of the loss to the kids, and the wealth to the charity is still 3.3 million. And here comes what I think is the most dramatic graphic that you can get using Wealthy and Wise in this kind of a context, and that's this one. As you can see, net worth is virtually the same. Transfer taxes are now off by more than 50%. Wealth to heirs is the same, and the charity gets 3.3 million. You're going to be hard-pressed to find a client that says that upper graph is better than the lower graph. So I think that the most important thing that we've learned here today is you can get that kind of result within the framework of people understanding that their cash flow has been a paramount consideration. Where they get their cash flow is a paramount consideration. Making sure their children are well taken care of. And this is not very, very complex tax planning. There's all kinds of other ideas that you can do in Wealthy and Wise, and the most advanced analysis of charitable trusts or loans funding life insurance, bank loans, family loans. But this one is a good example of how the logic of this system works.
Okay, Bob, so in listening to what you were saying, I think what you're saying is under the original plan with bad logic, this couple at life expectancy, they ended up with, let me see here, they ended up with 4.6 million in net worth, with about 3 million going to the kids. And that was assuming the 250,000 a year of after-tax income along the way during retirement. Versus the plan, this is the final plan now, that had the wealth replacement trust, where you really did all the things that made sense. And they ended up with a net worth of 10 million, 3.3 million going to charity, and 5.4 million going to the kids. Do I have that right?
Yep.
So that is a incredible difference in terms of doing the planning, figuring out where the income should come from, versus doing it and not doing it. And I think that's the point you're trying to make.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so the way you did this, the way you calculated all this, you used this software that you created, the Wealthy and Wise system. So for someone who wants to get access to that system, how does it work? How much does it cost? Where do they get it?
Well, you go to our website, insmark.com, insmark.com, and click on product and pick off the Wealthy and Wise icon. You can read about it, more about it. Or you can order it. It's got an initial fee of $1,500 and a monthly fee of $50 a month. Monthly fee covers all enhancements, and we enhance it quite regularly, and covers system maintenance, tech support, and so forth.
Yeah, it's really an amazing system.
If you want to talk to somebody about it for some reason, you could call 888-INSMARK. and speak to somebody, one of our account executives about it.
That's great. Well, we hope you've enjoyed our discussion with Bob Ritter from Insmark about retirement and estate planning, and we certainly hope this has been useful for you.